What's going on, guys? Back at ARW here. I'm gonna go over some stuff with some tuning. So as you've probably either seen in a different video or maybe the first part of this video, we're gonna do some of the tuning on this thing. Kind of went over some stuff last night to make sure everything seemed to be functioning right. Wideband's working. We got our TPS dialed in. Played with a little bit of the short-term fuel trims to get them in close. So yeah, let's kind of take a look at what we're working on here. The cable's not super long, so we have to be a little gentle with it. So you can see this is our basic page as it comes. I've added a few little gauges in here to kind of figure out what's going on. So the first thing that we're going to do is see how this thing cold starts. It's been sitting overnight. Yeah, so kind of show you what we're looking for here and see if we're going to go to closed loop settings. So as the car starts, and yeah, there's a couple of these that still need adjusted, but nothing too crazy. So as the car starts, we want to start with a richer mixture, and as it warms up, should lean out into like the 14.7. I usually go 14.7 to 15.0. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it here, but so our lambda limit is going to be 14.9. The target low speed on lambda is going to be a 14.9 is what we're targeting. As the car warms up, so you can see there as it warms up, it should go from, you know, as it's set right now, from like an upper 12.9 AFR into like the 14s and then almost into the 15s. So that's on closed loop. The other thing that we're going to kind of look at is our idle target and see how far off we are and what we need to do, because when we fired it up yesterday, it was kind of idling basically normal instead of a raised RPM on cold start. Yeah, so let's go ahead and fire it up and see what we're working with. Let me get back here to the layout. And what I always try to do is see if I can get it to start first with no throttle input. So we're gonna not touch the gas and see how it cold starts. And it's already not real happy. So we're gonna have to give it some throttle input and try and figure out why. Let's see, it's trying to idle. Okay guys, back with you. Totally kind of goofed on this one. So I turned the idle air control valve code back on. Sure enough, when we fired it up, it had an idle air control valve code. Something that I overlooked on these cars is, so this car has a B series throttle body on it, and a lot of you guys are gonna know that the K series idle air control valve is on the throttle body. So this car physically has no idle air control valve. Aside from maybe wiring in a MAC valve to an open port on the intake manifold, we have no provision for an idle air control valve. So I have no way of getting this thing to, you know, idle up or anything like that on cold start. So not much I can do about that. I'm gonna have to get with the owner and kind of see, you know, make sure that that's not gonna be a huge issue. I'm sure he's very well aware of what's going on. So this is the hand that I've been dealt, and now we're gonna have to live with it. So now the trick is to tune the car to have as good of a cold start as we can. I mean, you saw that you had to give it a little bit of throttle, so that's just what we're dealing with. So given the fact that it doesn't have an idle air control valve even on it, I guess it's not a terrible cold start. You have to kind of keep it running a little bit. Once it is warmed up, it runs really well. So yeah, so let's go back to layout. We're going to key off, back on. This is a very weird program, so let's get back in and connect to it. I did was I went back into our disable monitor and I went ahead and disabled the idle air control valve again. So that'll get rid of the check engine light for that. And then we're gonna go so we can see that the ECU is reflashing here, so we'll just wait patiently. And yeah, I think once we got everything kind of lined out pretty well, so once we get this thing warmed up, it'll be time to actually hit the road and get it all dialed in. The closed loop function seems to be working really well. It's very responsive. Part of me is not a real big fan of the K-tuner, but seeing how responsive everything is to changes, I do like that over the Honda. So yeah, so you can see this is what we deal with. We'll just maybe play some Jeopardy music here while we wait. One of the things that we're gonna look for is finished. Let me finish my statement when I get this. Let's get the vehicle off. Hit OK, so we're gonna hit OK. After 5 seconds, key the vehicle on. Usually a couple of seconds after the beeps in this car is what we do. Seems to be working pretty well. We hit OK. So now we're back to our live tables. We have control over our basic perimeters. So now what we're going to do is just let it warm up, and we're just going to have to keep it running or let it idle really low. There's just, at this point, there's no way around it. So you can see with no idle air control valve, when it's cold, it's just this is what we're doing. And with it having no idle air control valve, it is going to mess with our short-term fuel trims and whatnot. You can see it's not terrible. It is pulling a lot of fuel to try and meet the demands of the 14.2 AFR that it's targeting. So yeah, we're just letting it warm up. See that it's got an AEM in it. Oh, it's going crazy right now. Let's look over here. When it's cold, I have noticed in this car particularly that the OEM quote-unquote wideband does read quite a bit differently than the AEM. But when it's warmed up, they're within, you know, a tenth, 1 to 1.5 tenths of each other. So we're just letting it warm up. And you can see coolant temps at 100, and as it warms up, that target on the short-term fuel trim is going to get closer to 0. And what we're targeting is pretty much plus or minus, you know, 1 to 2% is really good. I mean, as close to 0 as possible, plus or minus. Alright guys, we are back in the Miata. We've had a little bit of time to let this thing warm up, you know, where there's not much that's going to change between 185 to about 200 degrees. So we're about warmed up. We can see we're idling at about 750. What we're going to kind of look for is that one right there, the short-term fuel trim. So what that basically means is it's targeting, you know, a 14.7, 14.8 AFR, and what it's telling me is that is that it's pulling 1.6-ish% fuel out to meet that mark. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go right here on our fuel table. We can see where those cells were highlighted where it's idling, and we're gonna do the Control J, and what we're gonna do is click on percentage, and we can see that it's about 1.6. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna duplicate what we see there. So we're gonna go negative 1.6%, and hit enter. And now what we should see is that start dropping as close to 0 as possible. So now we're within, we're within 0.5% of our target AFR. 1.6 isn't even terrible, but obviously the closer to 0, the better it is. So now we're a little over, but it's going to fluctuate a little bit. Back again with this thing has no idle air control valve, so just the way that the car is going to work, it's under light throttle and idling. I mean, it's going to be hard to get that thing to be at a 0. So if we can get it, I'm going to be pretty comfortable with it being, between 1 to 2%, plus or minus. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of a quick rundown on kind of the things that I start to look for when I'm doing some of the tuning stuff on closed loop. Fuel control is, basically what we're trying to do is get our short-term fuel trim to, be as close to 0. And what that's doing is adding or subtracting fuel to get the car to idle at a 14.7 to 14.8 AFR. So yeah, so we're looking pretty good. Everything seems to be functioning pretty well. We got good battery voltage. The motor is using kind of the factory oil pressure gauge, so this thing definitely has killer oil pressure. Man, we're really excited to get this thing out on the road, and yeah, I think the only thing that I'm going to do before we head out is maybe add a little more idle RPM to it. With a little adjustment screw over there that I can use. And yeah, we'll get this thing out on the road, and hopefully we'll get you some results here pretty soon. That's Brian revving it, it's not revving itself. This thing's got crazy oil pressure. Cold start in the morning, double check that, but should about wrap it up. He's a ripper.
Rips.